For some analysis on the current state of humanitarian concerns in the region, I'd like to bring in Kamran Bokhari. He's the founding director of the Center for Global Policy and non-resident scholar at the Arabia Foundation in Washington. He joins me from Chantilly, Virginia. Kamran, how could migrants at a detention center have become a target in this?
Lindsay, there are a number of possibilities. So one is faulty intelligence. And that happens quite frequently, not just in Libya, but around the world, where you just have wrong intelligence about a location. It's understood to be a military target when it's really not. And, nobody follows through. And, if you look at Libya, it's a very chaotic place. There are no, checks, or there are no systems in place so that either side, this is a civil war. We're not talking about a real functioning government. These are factions, and therefore they're not going to take those precautionary measures and double check what they're hitting.
What are conditions like in the region?
I think that Libya is just a mess, and I'm not really surprised by this attack, because in a state of chaos and anarchy, and where there are very few rules of the game, each side is trying to essentially subjugate the other militarily. So, in those kind of conditions, these kind of outcomes, as sad as they are, as horrific as they are bound to happen. I'm just surprised, we don't see more of this, given the situation in the country.
Why are we seeing these migrants in these kinds of facilities, and what are those facilities like?
I suspect that these facilities are not they're not really places where people should be kept, given that they're likely to be, places that, normally we wouldn't want to live. Nobody would want to live there. These are makeshift places. I suspect warehouse-like large facilities where people are just huddled together, where, food is not provided on time or in hygienic conditions. So I think that it's safe to say that these facilities are not where you would want people to be staying long term.
And many of the people who are there are fleeing violence in one place, ending up in another violent place. What needs to be done in order to help them?
Well, that's the sad part. There's not a whole lot that anybody can do, because there are so many stakeholders. There are geopolitical interests. Libya is like low on the totem pole of the West. The West has been trying to, under the auspices of the United Nations, to get a ceasefire and to get a negotiated settlement to the civil war that's been raging on in a very complex way. We have numerous factions. Yes, there are two main sides right now, but there are multiple factions on both sides. So in a situation like that, if you can't get a ceasefire and you can't get the governments to stop fighting, then there's not really much you can do about those migrants who are coming from, much south in Africa, in the Sahara region, the Sahel region, making their way up to Libya, and the hope to, maybe they can cross the Mediterranean. But in the end, if they're stopped there, and where do they end up? It's Libya, which is a war zone.
When you look at those efforts towards a ceasefire, do you see any sign that the hostilities could end soon?
I don't think so. I would be really surprised if hostilities ended anytime soon, because both sides are determined to win, and they have their respective backers, and they're not going to back down. And I think this is going to be a free-for-all for quite some time to come.
Truly sad for the people who are there.
Indeed.
Kamran Bokhari is the founding director of the Center for Global Policy and a non-resident scholar at the Arabia Foundation in Washington. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The U.S. is also being criticized for its treatment of migrants being held in detention centers. Democratic lawmakers and human rights groups say the conditions are inhumane. Coming up, we will speak to a reporter who is covering the border crisis and has spoken to some of the migrants. you.